Hi guys, welcome back to this channel. So today's tutorials is going to be on variables. In my previous video, I spoke about data type. In this video, I will speak about variables. And it's true, in the previous video, I spoke a little bit about variables, but in this one, I will go in much more details. And later on, I will also show you how we can declare variables in Java. So by definition, as I mentioned in the previous video, is variables are nothing but reserved memory location that are used to store values. So it's actually a container that will help to hold values for you whenever your program is running. And I also spoke about the importance of data types and variables, because when you design a program, one of the main function or the main purpose of the program is for it to be able to manipulate data. Okay, so, and when you design a program, depending on the kind of program that you are designing, you will be manipulating different kinds of data. For example, if you want a program that would just output the names of people or names of cities, for example, the kind of data you will manipulate are going to be strings, because these are sequences of characters. The names of cities or names of people are sequences of characters. But if you want another program where you want to make some arithmetic calculations, you will definitely need to store numbers, for example, for you to be able to, for your program to be able to make these calculations. So it's very important, variables in a program. So what do we need to know when we are actually declaring a variable? So as you can see on my screen here, I have declared variables. Okay. So here. So the first thing that we need to know about when we are declaring variables is that every variable must have a data type, which will determine the type and the quantity of, or the range of values that this variable will be able to hold. Okay, so the data type here is what I have on the left side of my screen. Okay, so when you declare a variable, you need to specify its data type. Like I said, that the data type will be responsible in determining the type of data and the range of values that this variable will be able to hold. Okay, so the byte, short, int, long, all the words that I have on the left side of my screen here are all data types. Okay, and another thing that we need to know is that the value stored in a variable can be changed during the program execution. So this, I'm gonna take an example. For example, if I store the value 10 to this in this variable A, and let me do a quick system out that print line A. So what I'm doing here is that this system that print line is an output statement, is to tell my program, okay, I want you to show on my console the value that is stored in A, for example. And then if I click on run here, you will see that it will give me the value 10. Okay. But if I use that very same variable A, and then I say that I will give it the value of 18, for example, And then I will still tell my program to show on my screen the value of A. What you will see is that it's not going to give me the value 10, even though I declared 10, at first here, but it will instead give me the value 18. Okay, so if I click on run, you see I have 18 here. So this is what, just to illustrate what I said, that the values that are stored in a variable can be changed during the execution of your program. So here we've seen that when we didn't have this expression, the value was 10, and then we came and added this statement here, and the value changed from 10 to 18. So this is actually how the compiler works. So if you have declared and you have assigned a value to your variable, and then you come here, you assign another value. So the compiler will take the value that has been assigned the last, and then store it in your variable. And this will also bring us to another point, is that so as you can see, it means that a value that you store in your variable, your variable can only hold one value at a time. Okay, it can only hold one value at a time, because we could have the tendency of thinking that, okay, since I've put 10 here and then I've come to put 18 here, so if I do a system.out that print line, I was supposed to get 10 and then 18, since I have like assigned two values. The variable here is only capable of holding one single value at a time. So if you assign a value here one time and then you assign a second value, so the second value is actually going to override the first value that you assigned before. So this is actually, but we have an exception. The exception is with arrays. Okay, here I have my array. I have int and then the brackets and then numbers. So arrays are actually used to store multiple values in a single variable. Okay, so like if I wanted to store multiple values like 10 and then 18 in a single variable called numbers, I would definitely use an array. Or if I don't want to use an array, I will have to use, I would have to declare separate variables that will hold all the different values, okay? Like for example, I would have to say, okay, let's call another variable f, and then I will give it the value 18, okay? So I'll have multiple variables holding different values. So if I don't want it to be like this, I will have to use an array, and then in that array, I will declare it like this, and then I will assign how do you call it? I will assign the numbers in my array. So this is how you assign. You put 10, for example, and then I'll put 20 and then 30, and I close it. So now what I'm saying is that I have one single variable that I have declared, and in that variable, I am storing 3 values, and this is an array. And this is how you declare an array. you can see the difference here is that, so for the ones we have on top here and the string here, we only have a data type and then the name given to our variable. But with an array, the way you declare it is that you have the data type and then you put the brackets to symbolize that this is actually an array that you want to declare, and then you give the identifier or the name to your variable. And then you now can be able to store multiple values. So if you don't want to use an array, you have to store it this way. So you have to create different variables, okay, different variables that would hold different values. So that's actually it. When we declare a variable, that's actually what we have to keep in mind. Another thing that we have to keep in mind is that a variable, so a variable is just a name given to a memory location. And that also means that all the operations that are done on the variable will affect that memory location, okay? So if any operation you do, if, for example, I change the value here, I change the value here, and so that means that my memory will hold a different value, okay? If I say E, and then I click on run, I have 40. And let me say, for example, I change it to 50, and then I click on run, I have 50. So whenever I play around with my variable, it will definitely affect the memory location. So if I change here, the output will definitely change, okay? And so the other thing that we can remember when declaring a variable is that in Java, all the variables must be declared before using them. For example, if I want to say, okay, I want to have a variable by the name of house, for example, and then I'll say I have a variable by the name of number, and I will assign value 10 to it. You will see that I have an error here, because what it's saying is number cannot be resolved to a variable. Why? Because the variable has not been declared first. Let's say, for example, if I say int, I give it, I declare it. Let's say, for example, I say, okay, I'll give it the data type of int number. You will see that I will no longer have an error because now the compiler knows that, okay, this number, NBRE, here is a variable because it has been declared already. So, and so the value that it's been assigned to is in harmony with the data type in the declaration. Okay, so this is what to keep in mind. So whenever you want to use a variable to manipulate your data, it's always important to make sure that that variable has been declared first. So, and I will also show you, for example, this, I have, it can happen that you have, you can declare various variables that are having the same data type in one line, okay? So there's another way to declare multiple variables having the same data type. For example, this int A, int F, int E, they all have a particularity, which is the data type that they are having, which is int. And I have declared it here, which is working perfectly. But there's also another way that I could declare it is by, instead of having 3 lines here, I could just declare them on a single line. I will put, okay, I'll remove this, and I will put a comma and then F and then a comma and E. Okay, so there's no error. So now the compiler knows that here I'm declaring multiple variables called A, F, and E. Okay, these are all variables that I want to declare, and all of them are having the data type of int. So this can work for particularly all the data types. So one thing to make sure is that all of these variables need to have the same data type. And then to also make sure that when you give the names to your variables, you have to separate them by commas, okay? You can put a period, for example, like this. If you put like this, you see, you have an error. Or you can put something like a semicolon, like this, you will still have an error. So we have to make sure that we have commas separating them, okay? So we can say, for example, we have another another variable declaration of type Boolean, and then I say T and the Q and Y, okay. So I couldn't use T because T is already used here. So that's why I was having the error. So here you see that it's also fine. It's also working fine, because what I'm trying to say here is that this variable Q is having a data type Boolean, and this variable Y is also having a data type of Boolean. So I am declaring both of them with a data type Boolean, and then there's no error prompting on my screen. So that means that it's cool. So this is another way. If, for example, instead of having multiple lines, you can just declare them on a single line here, and then separate the names of the variables by commas, and then make sure that all of the variables are supposed to have the same data type. So as you can see here, we have like warning signs. They are not necessarily errors, but the warnings, what it's saying is that the value of the local variable B is not used. So it's just telling us that you've declared a variable, and normally a variable is a container. It's supposed to contain a value, but in your program, there's nowhere you have assigned any particular value to the variable that you've just created. So it's like, if you're not going to use it, why not delete it, okay? Or maybe you've forgotten to assign a value to it. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next video, where I will talk about how to initialize variables, okay? To initialize a variable is simply to assign a value to a variable in our program, to assign a value to a variable for it to hold in the program. So this is it for variables, and then how to declare variables and certain things that we need to know when we are declaring variables. And I hope this has been informative to you. And don't forget to like the video, to share, and then to subscribe for more videos. Thanks a lot.